HB 1935 by Frullo relating to the carrying of certain knives.
Members, please excuse Representative Laudenberg because of important business on a motion of Representative Leach. Are there any objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Frullo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, before we get to Chairman Dutton's amendment, I want to briefly lay out this bill. HB 1935 is substantially similar to HB 3884 from last session, which passed the House. This bill is aimed at addressing a law that is fundamentally unfair and discriminatory. Current law is difficult to enforce because there are no definitions for terms used to describe a knife. These issues make it difficult for citizens, police, and the courts to know whether a knife is legal. Simply put, under current law, a person can be arrested, fined up to $4,000, and up to a Class 3 felony, sentenced to a year of jail or more for carrying an illegal knife in a location the person is allowed to carry a rifle or a shotgun. We're going to have an amendment by Chairman Dutton that will maintain the specific areas where weapons are currently prohibited, clarify how we define knives, and make the offense of carrying a knife over 5.5 inches a misdemeanor penalty, except for those offenses that occur on the grounds of a school or an education institution. Those penalties will remain a third-degree felony, just like current law. And with that, I'd like to get to the amendment.
Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Dutton.
Chair recognizes Mr. Dutton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, again, just to reiterate what Chairman Frullo has said, what this amendment does is it simply removes the ambiguous and undefined terms in the definition of a knife. It allows an individual under the age of 18 to carry a location-restricted knife under the direct supervision of the parent or the legal guardian. The location-restricted knife simply means that it's a knife with a blade over 5.5 inches, and it's also any location-restricted knife will not be allowed on school property. That's essentially what the amendment does. And I believe it's acceptable to the author.
Mr. Dutton offers up an amendment. It is acceptable to the author. Are there any objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Chair recognizes Mr. Frullo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage.
Ms. Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for some questions?
Gentleman yield?
Yes.
He yields.
Representative Frullo, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions to establish legislative intent, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Under current law, it is a criminal offense to carry an illegal knife on a college campus. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And under your floor amendment, it would remain illegal to possess a location-restricted knife on a college campus. Is that correct?
Yes. The current law remains the same as the law does after this passes. So it's the same thing. There's no change there on any institutes of education, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed.
Thank you. And under your floor amendment, it would only be an offense to carry a location-restricted knife in an area listed in the revised section 46.03, correct?
That's correct. Well, those areas that are outlined there as far as the additional items.
So, for example, a person could possess a location-restricted knife while walking down the sidewalk on Congress Avenue. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise here.
I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, can we have some order, please?
Yes, ma'am. House, please come to order.
So, for example, a person could still possess a location-restricted knife while walking down the sidewalk of Congress Avenue.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So to summarize, the act of carrying a location-restricted knife in an area not restricted by your bill is conduct that will no longer be covered by the penal code as an offense subject to a criminal penalty. Is that correct?
Exactly. No longer subject to a criminal penalty.
Thank you, Mr. Frullo. Mr. Speaker, I move that the comments between Mr. Frullo and myself be reduced to writing and placed in the journal.
Members, you heard the motion or the objection. Chair hears none, so ordered.
Move passage.
Members, the question occurs on passage and engrossment at HB 1935. All those in favor, aye. Those nay. The ayes have it. HB 1935 is passed to engrossment.
Lays out on third reading, final passage, House Bill 1935. Clerk, read the bill.
HB 1935 by Frullo relating to carrying of certain knives.
Chair recognizes Representative Frullo.
Thank you, members. This is a knife bill we talked about yesterday, removing or simplifying the items there, and I move passage.
Mr. Moody for purpose.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a couple questions?
You betcha.
So I know we adopted, I believe, the Dutton Amendment yesterday on second reading on this bill,
Yes, sir.
and that created a location-restricted knife.
Correct.
So it's a new concept, but it mimics other restrictions that we place on weapons in terms of locations they can and can't be carried. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and we struck out and we left as a location-restricted knife a knife that is a blade over 5.5 inches.
Correct.
And
That
so
was the law before this bill, and that's the law.
Well,
after.
the law before was also a lot of kind of odd terms: stiletto, dagger, all these other things. Right.
Correct.
So those more ambiguous terms have been removed as well.
Right.
And we've strictly gone back to, or we strictly limited it to the length of the knife at 5.5 inches. Is that correct?
Right before, because those terms were used in law, there was no definition of those items, and so this basically makes it easier for both citizens, law enforcement, and the courts to say, okay, that knife was over more than 5.5 inches, and that makes it the location-restricted knife.
Easier to prosecute in those cases because now
Well, I don't know about prosecuting, but it's easier for me as a citizen to know that my knife is legal.
to identify exactly what we're talking about, because those terms were fairly, like I said before, they were pretty ambiguous before.
Exactly. Right, it simplifies them.
Okay. Thank you very much. Did you have?
Good, thank you. Move passage.
Question occurs in final passage, House Bill 1935. It's a record vote. Clerk, ring the bell. Have all voted. 131 ayes and 1 nay. House Bill 1935 is finally passed.